would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. We're so close. Just 2 more days till Christmas. It's so exciting. I hope all of you get exactly what you're hoping for this year. Once you've wrapped up the Christmas festivities, I hope you can spend a little time doing what we talked about earlier in the week. Take a look back on your year, see where you've been, see how far you've gotten compared to where you wanted to be last year. If you're finishing off the year having very casually set your goals last year, maybe you didn't write them all down, maybe you didn't set them as goals, maybe you didn't use any of the tools I suggested. Let me suggest, and you're sitting here thinking, God, did I get anywhere? Because you don't even really know. Let me suggest you jump in and start really tracking your goals for next year. Nothing wrong with changing them along the way. In fact, it is a sign of a wise man or woman who can adapt to a changing landscape as new information comes out. So don't treat it as a gun to your head. Just treat it as a tool for you to keep these things at the front of your mind. I already suggested using the Google Calendar app. I use it on my phone. It's fantastic. I've got a link to my other calendars, and it lets me create things that are goals, so that if I don't do them, if I don't check them off, they'll automatic. Or if I set a time to do something else that conflicts with it, it'll automatically change the time to some other time that I've determined is acceptable for that goal. It's awesome. If you've got another tool, I'd love to hear about it. I'm all about helping people with different tools. I realize, again, going into the weeds, I apologize, but I'll tell you, this little smartphone has changed the way I can potentially do business. The amount of things, when I think about all the things I no longer have to do as a real estate person, in terms of getting signatures on things, being able to sign things myself on my phone with digital signatures, being able to get instant access to information on every home within hours drive from where I currently am, being able to get all kinds of background information on properties, being able to track what I'm trying to accomplish, being able to run numbers on whether or not a home and its situation makes sense as an investment. So freaking awesome, and such a great way for you if you've identified the things about yourself that make it hard for you to succeed. And we all have these traits. If you haven't already guessed, I can sometimes overanalyze things. And so I give myself a window of time to analyze, and then it's over if I go. You know what I mean? So I put a timer on myself to fight that. So I've got a tool that I've incorporated into acknowledging one of my shortcomings. Acknowledge what yours are. Are you a procrastinator? Are you someone that really doesn't know a whole lot about one aspect of the business? Look for some tools to help you deal with that stuff. I'm gonna have a series of what I think are pretty awesome videos coming up that are gonna walk through the whole analysis process. I've had a lot of folks ask for details on that, so that's going to be coming. I don't know how it'll dovetail in with the show in terms of just the audio, but there will be some new stuff on YouTube. I'm kind of stunned at how many people I do nothing with the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel just automatically inherits a show. I don't actually manually go and do anything with my shows and put them on YouTube. It's all automatic. And I was surprised to go in there and peek in the other day and see that I don't even what it was like. I think there were at least 50 or 60 subscribers in there. So, this will be a great way for me to reach out to the folks who are finding me there, but it'll also be a great way to have a new way to kind of visually get more involved with the show, and so that you can get a better insight into exactly what I do. Because one great thing about doing that as a tool is I can just record what I do on my desktop to analyze a property from a long distance that helps me get to the point where I can decide whether or not I need to go there and physically start checking this stuff out. So that stuff's coming down the pipe as well. Today, though, we're going to do a teeny bit of a revisit. We're once again talking about pensions, at least for the majority of the show. And the reason is because of some new interesting information. There was an article that came out from Zero Hedge. And of course, we've talked about Zero Hedge before. This is one of those sites where they'll frequently talk about really crazy stuff or talk about just data that's crazy that also happens to be true. And oftentimes I'll try to walk through it and explain whether we should be as upset as the folks at Zero Hedge are or not. And in this case, we should. So, because this is one that really points directly to what's going on with pension funds. And we talked about what's going on in Dallas and other cities, and how even a city that's doing exceptionally well could potentially be facing bankruptcy due to pensions. So then I started thinking it would be very interesting to know this kind of stuff ahead of time. So in addition to discussing this latest news relating to the amount of concern we need to have relating to pension funds, I thought it would be interesting to discuss cities with the highest unfunded pension liabilities. So we'll go through that top 10 list and see if any of these might just be an opportunity for you. And here's a couple other things. One, I've got a couple little data bits here that might be interesting to look at. When you're looking at investing, there's different strategies. You can be someone who gets drawn to very successful areas, hoping to also benefit from the success. But that's dicey because you got to know when to not do that, because at some point things turn around and slow down, like we saw with our numbers yesterday. Where is San Francisco? For the person who just bought that property in San Francisco a year ago, and maybe had either super tight cash flow on that rental, or maybe even negative cash flow, but figured rents will go up enough that I'll soon be positive cash flow. What did we see happen? Rents went down 5% in San Francisco over the last year. That's not good, right? Particularly if someone bought just a year ago or within the last year. They're not facing scheduled increases in the amount of rent. They're facing potential continuing declines in rent. Well, that's super bad news, particularly for folks who didn't have a margin built in there to assume that they might be buying at the top of a curve. Then there are folks who try to find that very first sign of things getting good, right? And we're already obviously way past that in San Francisco. I've been advising clients and you here on the show for well over a year to not look at San Francisco as a great place to invest in terms of buying properties for rentals and cash flow. It looks like we may still be entering, it may still be a good area for potential flipping, but even that's something that I'd want to be very careful about. But then there's also other communities, right, where we do spend a lot of time trying to find those communities here, right? We talked about this over the last few days, where we're looking for these communities that are just about to go, right, where they're projected to go, so that you can take advantage of that. Then there's the other kind. Now, these are communities that are heading downward, and the goal there is to purchase at the point where, if you want to get involved in those, it really comes down to ballparking where the bottom is. But I think also a thing to consider is the history of a city. So if let's say I saw a city that was on a list that was showing huge decline, right? What I would want to see is what was the sustainability of that city. So I'd want to look at data based on a long period of time, over say the last 20 years. And I'd want to see what are the averages been. So are we just way below an average? And then when it did start to decline, I'd want to know what caused that, what changed. And if it looks like it's a permanent change, then, well, maybe it's still looking for a new normal, right? Because it could just keep declining until it hits a certain point and then stay there. Or is this something that's transitory? Is this something that's not likely to stay forever? You know? Something that isn't likely to remain the same. If you can spot those and identify those, well, then you see that because of this thing that will absolutely change, properties are depressed or prices are depressed. You can jump in there, purchase, and if you're correct, enjoy a boost once that problem gets solved. Problems can take a lot of different forms. Problems could be bad water. If there's a solution for it, right? If there is a way to deal with the water problems and they just haven't been dealt with while they're dealing with those water problems, maybe that's a time for you to buy property while prices are depressed because no one wants to get in there. As long as you're confident those water problems are going to get solved. It could be any number of other things, right? Here in California is a perfect example. I talked about this. When we had the earthquake in '89, Los Gatos, a local community, was a very big, popular community, great schools. I've talked about it before. Stunning architecture, huge varieties, craftsmen, and all kinds of different styles of architecture. And it was, even back then, compared to the rest of the Bay Area, it was a very expensive place to buy. Well, the earthquake came along, and suddenly relatively large number of homes in Los Gatos slid off of their foundations. Well, this scared the crap out of a ton of people, and they ended up suddenly, October 16th, 1988, the house is worth X. Earthquake hits October 17th at 6:05 p.m. So suddenly on October 18th, those houses are selling for X minus 25%. And people are done. The earthquake has convinced some folks, I'm out of here. And some of them because they now see their house is not on its foundation and they don't want to deal with it. They want to sell the house as is. And I know a number of folks who jumped in and bought those homes, and on average for less than $10,000, they were able to put those homes back on their foundations. And suddenly you rent that thing out. You're getting the same rental rates that people were getting before in Los Gatos. And within a few months, everyone forgets, and houses are suddenly worth exactly what they were before the earthquake. And I know a number of people who took advantage of that opportunity. Sadly, I was not one of them. I was invited to, but I didn't at the time. Or not 88, it was the quake of 89, excuse me. But anyway, so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Things that are absolutely transitory. Things maybe like a city having to go bankrupt because of pensions, or things that they'll have to do that will cause a bizarre fluctuation potentially, not on the entire market, but in whatever market will affect folks who have retired from the police department, from the fire department, from whatever city job has a pension. And some of these cities that have the highest unfunded pension liabilities are the ones that are going to have the biggest problems. And these will most likely be temporary problems. There will be a transitionary phase where these cities abandon the pension model and go to more like the 401k model or those kinds of things. But there's going to be some upheaval there. There's going to be some stuff where bad things happen and people get a bad vibe about these areas. And it's likely to affect the real estate market to one degree or another. It may affect public services for a while until things get settled down. So this is an opportunity for us to sort of survey the landscape and say, all right, there is a huge amount of money floating around out there that is unfunded liabilities for pensions. Why don't we go down the list of the top 10? So we'll cover those. Now, one thing I wanted to do before that is to cover two other, not really horribly related to that issues. One is last year, you'll remember if you're a longtime listener, we talked about how New Jersey was the number one most left state. In other words, in terms of people leaving the state, New Jersey was number one. Well, this year we have a new number one, and that is Illinois. In fact, Illinois has record losses of 114,000 residents to other states in 2016 as population shrinks by 37,500 people. That is one resident lost every 4.6 minutes. Illinois has lost the equivalent of the 10 largest cities after Chicago due to net domestic migration since 2000. Population of Illinois' second through 11th largest cities, 2015, is the number one city in terms of population, 2015 population estimates. Aurora is number 2 is Aurora because number 1 is Chicago, but number 2 is Aurora with 200,000. Number 3 is Rockford with 148. Joliet, 147. Naperville, 147. Springfield, 116. Peoria, 115. Elgin, 112. Waukegan, 88,000. Champaign, 86,000. And Arlington Heights, 75,000. Now, for the third year in a row, Illinois is the only state in the region with a stinking and shrinking population. All of its surrounding states have actually seen net increases. So Wisconsin is up, Iowa's up, Missouri's up, Kentucky's up, Indiana's up, Michigan, Minnesota, all of the surrounding cities have seen increases. Now, while this doesn't fit the exact model of what I've just described, this is absolutely a situation where a huge shift or change is taking place. And as a result of this, there will be opportunities presented. It's strictly going to be the job of someone to go in there and look at the scenarios and see what's going on and figure out what's going to happen. So the idea here might be some of these areas are going to continue to decline. So what you need to do is pick the communities that are most likely to not suffer from this problem, or communities where while people are leaving, you need to find those individual places that show the highest probability of seeing a recovery in population, so that you can then be someone providing the product that is needed by folks who move there, which is housing. So take that as an opportunity. This is something I would probably suggest. Either you need to have a really good eye for this kind of stuff just out of the chute, or you'd want to be a little bit more of an experienced investor, I think, to take on this kind of a challenge, to see this kind of negative thing happening in a state and then believe that you can call out the areas that make sense. Is it ridiculously complicated? No, it's not really, but you really need to start getting into some nitty-gritty numbers in order to really figure out what places might make sense. The entire state of Illinois isn't going to shut down. It's not going to go away. It's not going to become a sea of any kind. It's still going to be there, and people will still be needing what they need to get by day. So it's really just a question of, can you spot the areas that are going to be least affected by this, and potentially when things do turn around and areas get more stable, are going to see increases in population the fastest. So there's another one. The next one I wanted to hit you with was bail-ins. Now, we talked about this. This is really negative interest rates. And Italy has joined in on this. So we're actually seeing a continuing expansion of this practice, and everybody should be worried about it. It's not a good thing. It basically means that any money that you potentially have in the bank could suddenly be taken. Now, we've talked about the details of this before. It happened in Cyprus. We saw it in Greece, where this actually happened, where folks had all of their assets frozen, and then a bail-in occurred, which meant instead of the government giving these banks money, the banks took these monies from you, the depositors, and that's legal. You are basically an investor in a bank when you have your funds in there, because they don't take your money and stick it in a vault somewhere. They take your money and put it in other things. So it would be within their rights to do this sort of thing. And this is an article that goes on a little bit and puts out this idea that there's actually a secret document from the Fed about how they're planning on incinerating savings and all this other kind of stuff, which is a little bit more into the out there zone. But the things they lay out here are actually very true. And when this does happen, it happens ridiculously fast. So still something I'm interested in, because I'm not someone who believes it can't happen here. I think it's extremely less likely than in a lot of other places to happen. But what's concerning is more that it's spreading, right? So let's not even talk about whether or not it's going to be an issue here in the United States. Let's just look at it as something that continues to grow, as something that's happening across the globe, and worry about it from that standpoint, right? Just like if anything else bad happening in the world started happening in more and more places, I'd absolutely be valid in my concern. I think that, wow, I'd be worried that might just happen here. So an article on that, of course, the show notes will include a link to this story. You can check this out for the details. It's kind of interesting, kind of creepy, a little bit of nightmare fuel if stuff like this keeps you up at night. So Merry Christmas, I guess, for that story. My little gift from me to you. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about the pension situation and see if we can't identify cities that may be an opportunity for someone to get in and some of these communities and be able to call the exact moment when it's going to make sense to invest there and then ride the natural increase in those areas as they recover from this really bad pension situation. So don't go away. We'll be right back with that.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We're covering a couple of interesting topics. We've already talked a little bit about how everyone's moving out of Illinois, how Italy has now joined in with the rest of the nations that are doing bail-ins or negative interest rates, where depositors and banks get their funds, some portion of their funds seized. And we talked a little bit earlier about some motivational things, but the soft, chewy center of today's show is definitely the pension situation. This is another article from Zero Hedge, and they're pointing out a red flag that pension funds are to sell near record amounts of stocks in the next few days. Now, if this becomes a reality, this brings in not only the popping of a pension bubble, but it also potentially pushes this public pension liability thing right over the edge with all these other communities, and it could come on and cause trouble very quickly. In a report by and this is me quoting the article now, in a report by the Swiss banks Victor Lin, whatever that, pension funds that rebalance monthly and quarterly would need to sell 38 billion of U.S. equities in coming days to rebalance to prior asset allocation levels. While regular readers are well aware, there has been a massive capital shift out of global bonds and into stocks in the fourth quarter, leading ironically to a mirror image result. While the value of global stocks has risen by $3 trillion since the U.S. election, according to Deutsche Bank, the value of debt has declined by an identical amount. So the value of the debt has declined, okay? But while market-to-market values of key asset holdings in pension portfolios have shifted violently, pensions have specific quotas to adhere to, which in this case means selling winners and buying losers to return to their mandated allocation percentages. As a result, according to their analysis, the estimated rotation out of domestic U.S. equities would be one of the largest on record, with relatively large outperformance versus other asset classes, both on a monthly and quarterly basis. Additionally, they estimate selling of $864 million in developed market international stocks. So that could be a big deal. According to this, there's also more bad news. The Credit Suisse analyst believes the selling in U.S. equities could increase to nearly $58 billion and bond buying to over $35 billion should equity bond relative performance continue to widen before year end. So what we see is a situation where and they have to do this by how the pensions are set up in terms of the mandate of how their assets are distributed and how and the relationship between the assets and the liabilities, what's performing, what's not performing. So this could be one of those things where you see a trigger that happens that causes this to happen, not by just a handful of pensions, but by pensions all across the country. So we've set the stage now that over the next few months, we may see the pension problem come to a head So it would be good then, I think, to have a little bit of an overview of what those cities are. What are the 10 biggest problem cities in terms of pension liabilities? So let's go ahead and hit that up. Let's see, what is this? That's not one of them. Sorry about that. Number 1 on our list is Saginaw, Michigan. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 190%. Yeah, that's what I said. 190%. So nearly double what their actual revenue is in the city. Number 9 on our list, St. Paul, Minnesota. And remember, that was number 10, so that wasn't the worst one. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue in St. Paul, Minnesota, 199%. So just about twice what the actual revenue is for the entire city. Number 8, Cincinnati. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 216%. Las Vegas, Nevada. See, now that introduces a nice wrinkle to the Las Vegas marketplace. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 234%. I remember reading an article recently that Las Vegas had enjoyed some of the best performances in terms of drawing in crowds and making money over the last couple of years. So what's amazing about this list is it's potentially going to hit markets that have actually been pretty good. We've had a few in here already. We're only at number 7, so we're only down 3 on this list. But some area, this is something that could absolutely present a interesting little window of opportunity, because think what happens when suddenly this pension problem comes along. It forces a lot of folks into a situation where, in order to recover from this, depending on who bears the brunt, if the folks who are in the pension end up bearing the brunt, and they almost always do, and the bottom line is the amount of ability to bail out a lot of these things just doesn't exist. These are folks who end up downsizing, and so they end up selling their homes, so we could see a glut of folks putting their homes on the market in these marketplaces. Okay, number 6 on our list, Billings, Montana. I like Billings, Montana. I have been to Billings, Montana. I am okay with Billings, Montana. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 245%. Wow. I did a show on pensions a couple of weeks ago. Go listen to that one. And if you don't agree with me on pensions, please Google pensions. The way pensions are run, and they have been run, and they're mostly only under governments, is just one of the most ridiculous, obvious pyramid schemes ever. And the fact that it's been allowed to get to the point where it's causing this much damage kind of blows my mind. There are better ways to secure the futures of these firefighters and policemen and other civil servants, other than signing them up for something like this, which never ends well. Number 5 on the list. We're only halfway through, and we're already up to over 250%. Charleston, West Virginia. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 261%. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't Charleston on one of our lists in terms of good places to invest not too long ago? I can't remember what the criteria was on that one. Was it return on investment? That's a little bit of an older list. We talked about that one, I think, back in May. But in any event, Charleston seems to me an otherwise relatively stable marketplace that would be worth a look. And in fact, I think I even did a walkthrough of analyzing a property in Charleston not too long ago. So the fact that it's on this list, I would definitely keep my finger on the pulse of what happens with this issue in that city. Number 4 on our list. I would not be going here. Newark, New Jersey. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 284%. Been to Newark, New Jersey. I'm sure it's a wonderful place. I apologize to anyone from Newark, New Jersey. I think I've told my New Jersey story. I went out to New Jersey once, landed and arrived in Newark, and in the cab heading to wherever the heck I was going, or I think I was going to Newark from the airport. I can't recall. The mixing of the smell of beer and what smelled like harsh chemicals was very shocking, and I decided to go jet skiing on the waterways of Jersey, fell off of it and stood up and sunk about a foot into the muck. And when I pulled my feet out, the muck was still on it and it was burning. And I hauled butt back to where I got the jet ski from and washed off my feet. And my feet were bleached white where the muck had been on me. So that was my fun moment in Jersey. So number 3 on our list, Portland, Oregon. See, this one's been on tons of our list. This is also one that's projected to be great next year. Total unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 284%. Unbelievable. I would absolutely put this one on my short list. Look for if this does hash out and it does end up really hitting people hard and they have to tighten their belts. It absolutely could be one of those things that pushes the desirability of moving or downselling, selling their home and moving into something smaller for some of these folks who need to tighten up their economics. Could absolutely play into this. Number 2 on our list, Springfield, Massachusetts, unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue. Wow, 315%. So, how does that, and I don't understand this. So, as a dad, there are things that I look at, right? So my kid comes home and he's been getting A's and suddenly he gets B's. And then I see he's getting B minuses. This is like me not mentioning any of this to my kid or figuring out what's going wrong until he's coming home with F's. Or even worse, coming home with F's, body piercings, and a lot of black emo makeup on. And all that's already happened before I've mentioned anything. So how the hell does this happen? And how do we not end up with whoever is in charge of this stuff strung up in these cities? Why didn't they start getting a little bit panicky when it was getting to 90% or 99% or 110? Maybe you think they'd get a little concerned once it hit 150. Nope, it blew right through 150 to 175, right through 200 and 250, right through 300 up to 315. And they're still doing the exact same thing. This isn't a list of cities that are changing anything to fix this problem. These are cities that have just let it fester until we get where we are now. Sorry, this kind of stuff just annoys me. Totally preventable problems really annoy me. And I had a hunch this one would be on the top of our list. Chicago, Illinois. What a number. Unfunded liability as a percentage of revenue, 359%. And that number is just going to get worse every single day because every single human being that moves out of that area is yet another negative number on how much revenue they are getting per year in that city. So that is just going to be an order of magnitude horrible thing. But here's the flip side. You could say horrible things about Illinois, Chicago, Detroit, all these places. In Chicago, I've heard people make the argument that Detroit's never coming back. I don't think that's quite as true as Chicago. I think Chicago has a rebound that happens for it. Don't know enough about Chicago specifically, but I've talked to a lot of folks who like Chicago, love Chicago, were born and raised there, big Cubs fans, and they tell me that there's just too much that Chicago has to offer in terms of location, access to different things. So, and downtown sounds exactly like that. So this would be one that maybe you want to look at. I think there's more miles to go on the path of Chicago in terms of figuring out where the bottom is. But this is actually not going to help, right? If you get a city like Chicago going bankrupt just on the backs of the pensions at 359% of revenue. Wow. I mean, that's shocking. And a lot of people should be very upset about that. But anyway, hopefully by pointing those cities out, we've got a few that poke out as you potentially interesting. This could represent, for some of these cities that are already facing problems, this could be yet another thing that absolutely pushes a bad situation into the much, much worse territory, and at the very least would serve to delay recoveries that may already be ongoing in some of these communities by potentially years. You're probably looking at and what's really horrible about some of these is, when you think about how does government solve problems like this, they try to sell bonds, they try to do all these other things. Nobody in some of these cities, who's going to buy a Chicago bond? If the city of Chicago wants to issue bonds, who's going to buy those? They're already in so much trouble for so many other reasons. So anyway, be safe and sane on this one. This represents an interesting risk in some of these cities. Some of these other ones that don't have as much going against them as the others would probably be worth taking a look at and being ready to move in the case of a scenario where suddenly the inventory jumps because of these worries over the pension. Because here's the other side of it. Even if they do find a solution to the pension problem, and so the pension folks are all okay, when this comes to a head and something must be done and people are talking about the city going bankrupt and all this other kind of stuff, folks are going to want to move out, whether they've got a pension or not, because this represents a huge threat to the city itself. So just the news of it is going to turn a market down. It's going to it's going to dramatically increase the potential of people wanting to sell. So keep an eye on these. I think these potentially could be opportunities for folks who want to try to get into some of these marketplaces. All right, folks, it's been a great week. I hope it's a fantastic weekend for all of you. Thanks again for spending your valuable time with me, and I hope every day you walk away with some great information that you can use, or maybe something just to make you think in a slightly different way or consider something you hadn't thought about before. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Have a very Merry Christmas, and thanks for listening.